Shalom and salam, we are Chaim Jellinek
and Nadja Raabe from Berlin.
and we thank you very much for inviting us to the conference Growing Up in a Mixed City. I would have loved to be personally with you, but I had health problems and the doctors say I shouldn't fly in the next days. Though I stay in Berlin, we stay in Berlin, and hope to give you some information about the city, our NGO, and this was one of the reasons why I've been invited to your conference. I want to say some words for being Jewish and living together with the Muslim.
Yes, thank you again, and I think it's a great conference.
Our NGO, we are a bunch of oldies still and since long time living in a mixed city. In Berlin we have 3.5 million citizens. Some years ago it's been 3 million. Some years ahead we will have 4 million people, hopefully. And these people are divided into very different communities. As always, there's a difference whether you come from a wealthy family or a poor family, but Berlin specialists, it's still of importance whether you belong to East Berlin, former capital of DDR, or if you come from West Berlin. And this is still of importance in social life in the city.
Absolutely.
And Berlin is a childless city. Only 17% of the adult population in the city live together with minors. We have a very, very big community of childless, green, wealthy city dwellers. And on the other side, we have a group of badly educated young people with no professional skills, unemployed, with big families and a migration background.
That's true. And Berlin is the city, the capital of singles. So you can see there's a mentality clash within the city.
Yeah. And there are a lot of political problems. We have a lack of more than 1,000 teachers in public schools, some thousand policemen, firefighters, public services. In consequence of the reunification of Germany, public services have been streamlined and thousands of working places have been disbanded.
Yes. So what would you say, what is one of the lasting problems in Berlin?
There are two fields of lasting problems for the city. One is the debt overload of 60 billion euros in 2015. The other is the still high rate of unemployment. For Berlin in total it's nearly 14%, but in the places with a lot of migration and poor population, unemployment rates, official unemployment rates are up to 20%, and in reality, for example, in Neukölln it's 30 or 35%.
That's really a lot, yeah. That's true. So there's a map that shows the poverty regions in some ways?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's a lot of poor districts in the middle of the town, in the center of the town, and only far on the eastern side, only some places with a poor population. But most of the poor population is living directly in the city. As you can see here, the regions in Berlin with the most migrant population is exactly where the poor population is living.
So there is a reference.
There's a reference. There's clearly a reference between being poor and being from a migration family. That's what you can see also on this side. Mm-hmm. The risk of living in childhood poverty depends on the number of children in the families. And as I told you, only 17% of the adult population in Berlin lives together with minors. The highest risk, the risk is growing with the number of children in one family. And you can see that very clearly in the group of early school leavers. Children living in a poor district and with non-German origin, the risk of early leaving school is 4 times as high as if you come from a wealthy district and a German family, German origin.
Yeah, which basically also has an impact on the political landscape in Berlin, I would say.
As we could see in the last regional votes, I would like to say something to the last year. We saw a completely divided society between the ones who welcomed refugees and caught off guard conservatives on the other side, living in a paranoid propaganda of the wave of Islamists, rapists, thefts, terrorists, destroying our German way of life and living in a feeling of the end is near.
Which is crazy if you think the wave that really came upon us was a lot of terrorism from the right and a lot of Nazi attacks, I would say, in some regions of Germany.
Yeah, and the astonishing thing is that some of the terrorists who were caught by police, they had no connection to any Nazi group or something like that. They just felt being a good neighbor, and they have the right to fight against refugee shelters or something like that. Let's come back to the political changes in Berlin. We had regional parliament elections this year, and as you can see on that map, one thing is the wealthy parts of Berlin voted conservative. The poorer and middle class groups voted social democrats or socialists. And you see a new color on that political map, and that's blue. That's a melange of different Nazis, right-wing conservatives, conservative fundamentalists founding a new party called AfD, and they won 15%, especially in these places without migration at all.
Yeah, so I was shocked to find out that it was nearly 14% all over Berlin voting for AfD, and AfD stands for Democratic. Of course, it's not a democratic party.
Yeah, but we will have to fight against them. As we already discussed, hate crime is a problem, a growing problem, and the most shocking thing for me is that hate crime is no longer a problem of right-wing extremists. It's something moving into conservative neighborhoods.
Or sometimes frustrated middle class or poor class.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thinking and believing that they have the right to attack people whom they don't like.
Yeah, which clearly is the opposite of what our law stands for, and also what our politicians try to claim, that we can do it, as Ms. Merkel said. Wir schaffen das, we will make it. So that's sort of the two realities at the same time.
Yeah. one reality is politicians always say, oh, wir schaffen das. The other reality is the scandal about Lageso, a public service who had to
Administrate in some way.
to administrate the refugees coming to Berlin, and it's been a disaster. In the last winter, it's really been a disaster. Refugees had to stand in front of that public service for days. They had a number, and nobody knew when his number will be called, so that he could go in and be registered. But the registration is the first step to get a place to sleep and money. So
yeah, it's incredible. We still are waiting for some of the administration from last September to finish up with what they have to do, is to calculate all the rents and everything. So it's crazy. It's so crazy.
yeah, and it's connected with corruption. Lageso is connected with corruption on different levels of the public service. One level is that they decided to let there be an Arab-speaking security service who sold tickets to get earlier into the office. And there's corruption on every level of this place. Now, we talked about the wave and the panic of many Germans. They would be overrun by refugees, by Islamists and stuff like that. The reality is the total number of asylum seekers in 2015 have been in Berlin 80,000. And the maximum of them came in November, 10,000 persons. And a total number of unintended minors in 2015 have been 4,252 in Berlin.
Yeah, so actually the numbers were not as extreme as the forecast was saying.
Yeah, and it's been an instrument of propaganda against the refugees. So I would like to give you some information about who is responsible and who cares for the unintended refugee kids living in our mixed city. 12 communal services have to guardianship children. That means youth welfare services have to organize a safe place for the children, medical and psychosocial treatment, education in public schools. And it's a right of these children to have that immediately after registration. The problem is there is nobody to register and there is nobody to welcome these children. There's a lack of money, a staff shortage, and of course institutional racism. The public school system is completely overstrained, and which is no wonder there's an extensive lack of psychodiagnostic and therapeutic trained manpower for these children. The solution the politics wanted was to decide to let private agencies do the work.
And then we come back to the problem of corruption. If only private agencies are doing this work, I think.
That's a new problem, and that's what we learned. Now we see an unmanageable diversity of different providers, no quality standards, staff of doubtful quality. So these are the profit-oriented companies. And on the other side, there is a public-controlled, officially recognized in-care provider. So how to make money out of children?
Right. Seems to be the topic. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a good chance to make a lot of money out of refugee children because of already done political decisions. First, companies are paid by a flat charge per capita per month. There is already a framework contract for quality of staff, central objectives in education and points like that. But there is too little energy to control these companies. The public service is not able to control whom they pay. So if you are cold-blooded enough, you can make a lot of money out of refugees by finding cheap accommodation, fill the house with a lot of children, be short-staffed, and close your doors for voluntary services.
Which there are a lot of voluntary services in Berlin, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The other side, the public-controlled, officially recognized in-care provider work different. They have this amount of money, and therefore they organized shared flats for a maximum of 6 children, assisted by a female and male social worker, cross-linked with nearby public school system, with a professional sensibility for cultural needs and for a professional sensibility for symptoms of PTDS. Not every refugee coming to Germany or Berlin is having PTDS, but actual evidence says it's up to 30 to 50% of the children coming to Berlin. And these officially recognized in-care provider, of course, want work together with the energy and the goodwill of voluntary services. Mm-hmm. And they do, for example, teaching German, they are tutoring homework, they accompany refugees in cultural activities or sightseeing, they organize invitations into German families and other youth groups, for example.
Yeah, so there are some good things happening also.
There are a lot of good things happening, and it's not only run by the professionals, but the voluntary citizens working voluntarily with refugees often need professional help, and this is organized by in-care providers, for example, teaching and supervising volunteers for guardianship. Guardianship is very important for youth, refugees. Guardianship has to secure housing appropriate for children, enable adequate school education or professional education. They have to do the arrangement for medical treatment, legal proxy, and they have to support in questions of right of residence. And I think there are round about 500 guardianships run by voluntary citizens.
Which you really need if you have over 4,000 minors in the city.
Yes.
So that's a lot of people.
Though the actual most ugly road works to do in Berlin, it's still that 39,000 refugees live in emergency shelters, and 1/3 of them are children. As I told you, law says children have to be taken in care immediately. In reality, it takes up to 12 months until the guardianship is installed. This guardianship is important for every decision about asylum. It's important to bring these children into insurance, medical insurance, and to get the money they have to get. Still, 1,500 children have to live in shelters run by companies with primarily monetary goals. And until now, 2,600 children have no place in public schools.
That's really terrible. There are different ways of learning German, I guess. It's a nice caricature that you found.
So you as a specialist, you do that since a long time, teaching refugees?
Teaching another language to children was one of my professions, and I learned with Helen Deron group actually. So dance and English and German. So what we did is we taught kindergarten kids in the beginning, and also I was teaching in different high schools, because in Berlin you have a lot of high schools which have a bilingual concept. And that was always a lot of fun. And now voluntarily, the first lectures or lessons for asylum seekers and for a lot of Syrians and people coming from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Now, let's draw a first conclusion.
Poor but sexy, that's what they always say about Berlin.
Yeah, poor but sexy. Berlin destroyed extensively its public health service to reduce its debt overload in the last 20 years. In the last year, in 2015, politicians raised fears against refugees to distract from the ruined public service. Thousands of voluntary citizens tried and still try to welcome the refugees and their families and to organize the fundamentals of integration, that is language, work, accommodation, and childcare. But there's no doubt about that. Integration of 80,000 new Berliners needs money and political will to spend this money. Voluntary services do a lot of good work, but you would degrade them to useful fools of austerity if politicians are not willing to spend the money integration needs.
Yeah, how we met also is interesting. In Café Freedomus, it was like a central point for the refugees to come together, and as you said, to cook together also, and to play together and to learn together. It was great, I think.
Yeah, before that we used to help in a shelter called Elisabeth House since winter 2014-2015 with counseling, German language training and all that stuff. And we had and have a lot of good times by cooking, eating, talking with a lot of people who would never have met if they wouldn't have left their homes. One of the first things we did, we wrote a book. And our welcome book gave first informations for everybody who just arrived in Berlin about what is the asylum procedure about, what does the Dublin regulations mean for them, what about living in Berlin, how do you get a bank account, how can you use public transport, how do you get the chance to learn German, how do you get medical treatment, how do you get a place for your children in school or kindergarten. And we did that book in 9,000 copies in different languages, Arab, English, French, Farsi, Russian, and spread that all over the shelters to welcome the people in Berlin and to help them to arrive in Berlin. In 2016, we saw only a few newcomers. So the next edition of our book will focus on schooling and off-job trainings, on professional and academic education, on employment agencies. And the translation for this book will be done by refugees being paid by a mini-job construction. That means they earn money. They earn their own money, but it's less money than so that they don't have to pay tax. And that means voluntary engagement. We have enough money to pay the people for their work already for this project.
Mm-hmm. So because of the donations also?
Yeah, because of donations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is also part of what we did was we found some godparents for people who would help for the first steps to find their own accommodation or their own apartment. So.
And that's the one of the most important points in the city. the city is growing 30 to up to 40,000 people every year. Berlin. Now we have 80,000 new Berliners, and we don't have accommodation enough for all these people. So it's been of very importance to professionalize the way how to get accommodation. You are the profi.
Yes. Yeah, so one thing was to define what is a home or what is an apartment in a new way, and to find shelter. We were saying it was a group of initiatives who is still existing, and one of the networking initiatives is, for example, Be an Angel. They also work with godparents. One is called, our company is called At Home in Europe, and we help from 3 to 6 months to find something, and sometimes we already have some communities. They stay together in a big apartment, and they can live like a family even when they are not a family, and they can help each other or cook together. And then there's a lot of regional help like Pankow Hilft. There's even a Facebook group in Marzahn. An old lady, she helps the refugees in Marzahn, and which is formerly GDR and very much east.
And home country of the right-wing AfD.
Yes, also. And then there's Home for Refugees, which is a great Facebook site, and it's Syrian who translates everything also into Arabic language, and it works very well as well. So I would say our second conclusion is that we really had an interesting journey the last year, and that we met a lot of interesting people.
Yeah, Germans and non-Germans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I personally feel I start to understand the background and the consequences of being a refugee much better, because now we have an intensive contact to the people we work with for a long time, and it shows off what problems the refugees have to overwhelm to really arrive Berlin. For us, for Freedomus, for our little NGO, it's important to say that we are no do-gooders. We know very well that that you are not an angel just because you are a refugee, and we know very well that some of the problems of the countries where the people come from do arrive in our city and our country, but most of the people we met people leaving their homes because they couldn't get what they want existentially for their life: freedom, the possibility to say and think what they want to think, and to move without war.
And we also are not angels, and we also have our problems in our life, our family. But it's also something that is fulfilling to see the different ways of living, I think.
Yes, but our resources voluntarily work are limited. We have to focus on what we are able to stand. What we learned is integration is not a quick race, it's a marathon.
And it's not a one-way street, for sure. It also means that our ways of living have to be respected, and vice versa.
So, and this is a perfect point for the last comment we want to do. And that's a personal one, because I've been invited, also been invited as a Jew living together with a Muslim. And the first thing of importance for me is who looks at me, who wants to decide whether I'm a refugee or Jewish, Christian, secular, anarchist, communist, conservative. Who's interested in that? Who's interested to divide reality in these different scenes?
And drawers, basically.
Yeah.
Because there might be a drawer that you fit into 10 years from now or 10 years ago. Maybe someone was an anarchist and then he becomes a Zen Buddhist, so it's all possible.
So being Jewish and living together with a Muslim, who cares? That's easy to say if you live in diaspora, I know. But we are quite overwhelmed as family to the reactions we get for what we did. We had spare room. Our oldest son left our house. We gave that room to one in need, and that's been all. So who the fuck cares whether we are Jewish or not, and whether the guy we live together now is Muslim or whatever. All we need in daily life is a category outside of religion. It's a question of respect. Respect we have for him and respect he has for our way of life and for our way of thinking. So talking about integration, it's never a one-way road. Thank you very much for listening. We would enjoy to get in contact with you and to get a feedback. We'll try to react very easily, and maybe you'll find a way to come to Berlin one day. Welcome.
Yes, and we will always find an accommodation for you. Okay, thank you.